And I'm outraged, I'm sickened, and I'm saddened. By the way, Shedeur continues to be treated in the National Football League, now by those sorry-ass Browns and sorry-ass Kevin Stefanski.
Newly surfaced footage of Shedeur Sanders' injury has ignited a storm of controversy in Cleveland, with many now pointing the finger at head coach Kevin Stefanski. The video has fueled questions not just about Sanders' health, but about whether Stefanski's handling of the situation has cost him the trust of both the locker room and ownership. What was once just a whisper about his job security is now an open debate, and the pressure around the Browns' sideline has never been higher. TV ratings spiked 31% the moment Shedeur Sanders took the field in his first preseason action, but the drop-off after his injury was just as dramatic, leaving the Browns scrambling to explain how their most valuable asset was put in harm's way. For Kevin Stefanski, the timing could not have been worse. Ownership had already been quietly frustrated with the uneven offense in recent seasons, and now footage of Sanders limping off, replayed across national networks, has become the symbol of Cleveland's mounting dysfunction. Coaches know perception can be as damning as results, and in this case, the optics of Sanders' injury during Stefanski's watch may matter more than the injury itself. The central issue isn't simply that Sanders got dinged up, it's that he did so in a controlled setting where reps were supposed to be carefully managed. Reports indicate Sanders took 42% of available first-team snaps during the period leading up to the incident, a heavy workload compared to other rookie quarterbacks. By contrast, CJ Stroud and Bryce Young averaged closer to 28% of first-team reps during their first extended camps, as their coaches tried to balance preparation with preservation. Stefanski's decision to keep Sanders on the field for extended stretches is being painted by critics as reckless, a gamble that backfired with footage now circulating to millions of fans online. This isn't just about player health, it's about control of the narrative. Once the clip hit ESPN and was reposted across TikTok and X, the backlash was immediate. Within 48 hours, resale prices for the Browns' upcoming home game fell from a $280 average to barely $160, a drop of nearly 43%. Stadium demand has always followed star quarterbacks, and the Browns finally had one who drove national curiosity. That momentum evaporated the moment Sanders was shown hobbling, while Stefanski was caught on the sideline with a visibly frustrated expression, unable to contain the optics of crisis. Inside the building, ownership is said to be weighing whether Stefanski has lost the margin of error afforded to most coaches of young quarterbacks. This is a franchise that saw its local TV ratings jump by almost 35% year over year once Sanders was drafted, a rare surge in a market that had plateaued after years of inconsistent quarterback play. Every percentage point matters when regional ad deals, sponsorship renewals, and merchandise revenue hang in the balance. If Sanders represents a generational business opportunity, then the man responsible for overseeing his early development becomes directly accountable for protecting that asset. Gambling markets have only added fuel to the narrative. Sportsbooks reported a 48% drop in Browns-related prop bets the week after Sanders was pulled from practice, with many bettors citing uncertainty over how long he would be sidelined. Prop bet volume is one of the NFL's most sensitive leading indicators of fan confidence, and when the numbers dip that drastically, owners take notice. Stefanski's job performance, once measured purely in win-loss record and playoff berths, is now tied to gambling handle, TV ratings, and resale data, measurable business outcomes that ownership can't ignore. The Browns' locker room dynamic adds another layer. Veteran players, who had already raised concerns privately about the team's offensive predictability, are said to be frustrated that Sanders' protection has become a storyline this early. Offensive linemen are reportedly fielding questions they shouldn't have to answer in September, and the sense that the coaching staff failed to balance preparation with risk is spreading. For a team that finally had national buzz, the shift back to controversy is a gut punch, and Stefanski's name is increasingly tied to that shift. Unlike isolated injuries that fans quickly move past, this moment feels sticky. The footage itself is a constant replay, and each time it rolls across NFL Network or social media timelines, it reinforces the perception of negligence. Analysts have noted that in the era of hypervisual media, one damaging clip can outweigh dozens of positive reports. For Stefanski, the fact that this injury occurred under his watch is already being baked into broader narratives about whether he has the command and foresight to maximize Sanders' potential. In short, he isn't fighting just for control of a locker room. He's fighting the gravitational pull of viral imagery that frames him as the problem. The immediate headline is unmistakable. Kevin Stefanski's job is now tethered directly to Shedeur Sanders' health, and the latest footage has made that connection impossible to ignore. The Browns' future, both on the field and in the business of football, is suddenly hanging on a rookie's recovery timeline and a coach's ability to justify decisions that are already being second-guessed in boardrooms, broadcast booths, and fan forums alike. Losing those reps means Stefanski has no film to evaluate Sanders with the full set of starters, and that could end up being the defining failure of his tenure. Quarterback development is fragile, and timing is everything. By the time Sanders got hurt, he had logged just under 60 total competitive reps with the projected starting offensive line, according to internal camp counts leaked through local reporters. That number is far below the 120 to 150 reps coaches like Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan preferred to log with their young passers before weekend. Without that body of film, Stefanski is flying blind when it comes to evaluating Sanders' timing with his receivers, and the Browns' offensive identity becomes little more than a guess heading into meaningful games. The tangible consequences are showing up on the business side almost as quickly as they are on the field. In the week leading up to Sanders' injury, Browns jersey sales had climbed to 4th in the NFL, with Sanders' number 14 ranking among the top 5 sellers league-wide. By the week after the injury, Fanatics reported that sales of his jersey had dropped nearly 29%, while Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes returned to the top of the charts. It may seem cosmetic, but merchandise sales are one of the most reliable proxies for fan enthusiasm, and a near 1/3 drop tells ownership the Browns' momentum has stalled. When you pair that with falling secondary market ticket prices, the pattern becomes undeniable. Nationally, the NFL is watching too. The Browns were scheduled for 3 nationally televised games in the first half of the season, a rarity for a team that had been all but invisible on primetime slates in previous years. Broadcast partners made that call on the assumption that Sanders would drive interest, and the early numbers backed it up. Cleveland's preseason game against the Giants drew 5.8 million viewers, a 32% jump from their average preseason audience in the previous 3 years combined. But when Sanders was sidelined for the following game, the ratings cratered to just 3.9 million, marking one of the sharpest week-to-week drops of the summer. Networks track these swings closely, and Stefanski is now being painted as the coach whose decisions cost the league millions of eyeballs. For the players in the locker room, the injury represents more than lost production. It's lost trust. Receivers like Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore, who had been raving publicly about Sanders' work ethic, are suddenly left answering questions about whether they'll get meaningful chemistry built before week 1. Linebackers who had been buzzing about Sanders elevating the team's energy now see the defense carrying the load again while the offense flounders in camp. Even Myles Garrett, typically measured in his comments, admitted the team needed clarity at quarterback sooner rather than later, a statement many took as subtle criticism of the coaching staff's handling of the situation. The gambling markets echo the sense of uncertainty. Odds makers had the Browns at plus 180 to win the division just 2 weeks ago, their best odds in the last 5 seasons. After Sanders' injury, those odds ballooned to plus 260, a swing that signals sportsbooks believe the Browns are once again a tier below the Ravens and Bengals. Division odds aren't just trivia, they influence betting handle, fan optimism, and even the willingness of national media to spotlight the team. Stefanski may not control Vegas lines, but when they move in the wrong direction under his stewardship, it feeds the narrative of instability. All of this is why the question of why it matters now has such sharp edges for Stefanski. The Browns don't just have a rookie quarterback, they have the most buzzed about rookie quarterback in recent memory, and that means every decision is amplified. Fans don't forget when their hope is compromised. Ownership doesn't forget when the business side takes a measurable hit, and the league certainly doesn't forget when TV partners lose millions of viewers. Sanders' injury footage is more than a viral clip, it's a scoreboard of mismanagement, with tangible consequences visible across every metric that matters. The bottom line is clear, Stefanski can't afford for Sanders to be a what-if story, because the Browns are already paying a price. The injury came at the exact moment when momentum was peaking, and the timing has turned what could have been a footnote into the central drama of the season. Every missed rep, every ticket unsold, every TV viewer lost piles up as evidence against Stefanski, and that is why this moment feels less like a setback and more like a tipping point. Unlike Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, who sat his rookie year behind Alex Smith and benefited from Andy Reid's deliberate pace, Shedeur Sanders has been thrust into a situation where every snap is both an audition and a ratings driver. driver. Mahomes logged just 35 live snaps before his first regular season start, while Sanders was already at 57 preseason snaps when the injury footage emerged. The contrast is glaring. Reed protected his quarterback with patience, while Stefanski exposed his to risk under the guise of preparation, and the result is that the Browns now face a crisis weeks before the games even count. History is filled with cautionary tales of coaches who lost their jobs over mishandling young quarterbacks. Robert Griffin III's rookie year under Mike Shanahan remains a prime example. Washington drew record viewership numbers in 2012, selling out every game and driving jersey sales into the top 3 league-wide. But Griffin's injury mismanagement turned the team from a national draw into a cautionary tale, and within 2 years, Shanahan was gone. That parallel is now being raised in Cleveland media circles, with Stefanski's situation eerily echoing the same arc: an electrifying rookie, a surge in national interest, and an injury that shifts the spotlight from hope to blame. Even more recent comparisons add weight. In 2021, Justin Fields was managed cautiously by the Bears, but when he was thrown into extended preseason duty and sacked 9 times in limited appearances, criticism fell directly on Matt Nagy. Within months, Nagy was fired, and the prevailing narrative was that he jeopardized the team's future by mishandling a highly valued young quarterback. The Bears' local TV ratings dropped nearly 20% year over year during that stretch. Ticket demand cratered, and Nagy became the scapegoat. Cleveland is watching a similar pattern unfold, with numbers already hinting at a decline. The Browns' preseason attendance fell from 67,000 in Sanders' debut to 54,000 once word spread of his injury. A 19% plunge that mirrors Chicago's collapse when confidence in the coaching staff evaporated. By contrast, franchises that managed their rookie quarterbacks with extreme caution reaped long-term benefits. Lamar Jackson's early career under John Harbaugh was carefully measured, with Baltimore limiting his exposure until the offensive system was fully built around him. The Ravens saw steady year-over-year growth in attendance, and their local TV share jumped 15% once Jackson became the full-time starter. Stefanski doesn't have the luxury of hindsight, but the juxtaposition is damning. Baltimore grew by protecting their star, while Cleveland is now shrinking after exposing theirs. The business impact amplifies the coaching comparison even further. When Sanders was announced as a starter for the first preseason game, ticket resale prices surged by nearly 52% above face value. That same week, Browns-related content on YouTube drew a combined 14 million views across highlight packages and commentary, tripling their off-season average. Compare that to the week after Sanders' injury footage leaked, when resale values collapsed and online views for Browns content fell back to just 4.2 million. Media consumption around the team has become a direct referendum on Stefanski's handling of his quarterback. No other coach in recent memory has seen such a tight correlation between a single player's health and their own job security. Even ownership trends point toward a familiar cycle. In Miami, Joe Philbin's fate was sealed when Ryan Tannehill's development stalled, and the Dolphins' ticket sales flatlined despite being in a booming market. By the time Stephen Ross made the change, it was clear that the coach's inability to protect and develop his quarterback was bleeding into the bottom line. In Cleveland, Jimmy and Dee Haslam are businessmen before they are football owners, and they are surely tracking the Browns' revenue streams just as closely as they are tracking wins and losses. With measurable drops already visible in jersey sales, secondary ticket markets, and national ratings, the Stefanski situation feels less like speculation and more like a case study already in progress. The most sobering comparison might be Andrew Luck. The Colts sold out nearly every game during his early years, and Indianapolis was a fixture on primetime schedules. But years of injuries, many tied to coaching decisions about protection and workload, wore Luck down and eventually forced an early retirement. The fallout was catastrophic. Colts' TV ratings plummeted 37% the season after his exit, and local sponsorships were renegotiated at lower values. Cleveland fans are already whispering about that nightmare scenario. What if Sanders, who is supposed to be their generational star, follows a similar trajectory because his coach failed to manage his development responsibly? That is the haunting comparison dogging Stefanski now. Other coaches have survived poor win-loss records if they showed they could nurture a young quarterback. Few have survived the perception of risking their franchise's future. Every historical example suggests the outcome is predictable. Once ownership believes the coach is jeopardizing the long-term value of their most most important asset, the clock begins ticking toward dismissal. Stefanski is no longer being measured against other Browns coaches. He is being measured against a league-wide history of mismanagement, and that is a battle no coach has ever won. Merchandise tells a story numbers on the field never can, and in Cleveland's case, that story is sobering. In the 2 weeks following Shedeur Sanders' preseason debut, Fanatics reported his jersey was outselling every Browns item combined, accounting for nearly 62% of all team merchandise revenue. Once the injury footage surfaced, however, that figure fell to 33%, a staggering 29-point collapse that directly reflects fan hesitation. For ownership, this isn't just a statistic, as it's a cash flow line that shrank overnight. The Browns had positioned Sanders as the face of their marketing push for 2025, and the footage instantly weakened their leverage in sponsorship negotiations, forcing questions about whether Cleveland can reliably deliver star power on the field. Corporate partners track these shifts with precision. Regional beverage and automotive sponsors, who had just committed to bundled advertising packages built around Sanders, are now quietly pushing for opt-out clauses or renegotiation windows. One industry source estimated that the Browns' local sponsorship pipeline could shrink by as much as 12% if Sanders misses significant time, a margin large enough to alter the team's annual revenue targets. The NFL is a business where every percentage point of growth matters, and losing even a fraction of momentum with a rising star can cost millions in real dollars. Stefanski might not control sponsorship contracts, but he does control the perception of player management, and perception is often what dictates whether partners stay engaged. Fan sentiment offers another layer of measurable fallout. Local radio call-in segments that had been filled with optimism after Sanders' early performances suddenly shifted tone within 72 hours of the footage leak. The Cleveland Plain Dealer's online poll, which had shown 78% of fans expressing confidence in Stefanski after the draft, collapsed to just 42% following the injury news. Social media engagement told the same story. Browns-related hashtags that were driving millions of impressions in August were down more than 40% by mid-September. The common thread across these platforms is a growing belief that Stefanski jeopardized Sanders by overexposing him to risk in practice and preseason games. The gambling market data amplifies the perception shift. Sportsbooks noted that Browns futures bets had accounted for nearly 7% of total NFL handle during August, an unusually high figure for a franchise that typically hovers around 2%. After the injury footage, that share fell to just 2.5%, erasing weeks of betting momentum. Even more telling, player-specific prop bets tied to Sanders, such as passing yards and touchdown totals, saw a 58% week-to-week decline. Bettors are rarely sentimental. They are pragmatic, and when their money dries up, it's a direct reflection of diminished confidence. Those numbers now sit on ownership's desk, painting Stefanski as the variable most responsible for the drop. Bars and restaurants near Cleveland Browns Stadium have also felt the pinch. One owner told local media that his game day reservations dropped nearly 20% after news broke that Sanders might not be fully available. These businesses thrive on the buzz of a star quarterback, and when that buzz fades, the economic ripple touches everything from food sales to parking revenue. Cleveland has long fought the narrative of being a small market team, but Sanders briefly transformed them into a national brand. Stefanski's handling of his quarterback has now flipped that trajectory, costing not just the team, but the broader local economy measurable dollars. The most damning part of the deeper context is how visible the collapse is to broadcast executives. Networks that had already earmarked the Browns for feature slots are suddenly bracing for underwhelming numbers. When preseason ratings dropped by nearly 2 million viewers week to week without Sanders, it wasn't just an anomaly, it was a preview of what could happen in primetime. Advertisers who paid premiums to be in those slots are now calculating lost value, and the league office will not hesitate to pressure ownership if Cleveland underdelivers. The NFL thrives on stars, and when a coach is perceived as the reason a star's availability is compromised, it becomes a league-wide problem, not just a local one. In sum, the deeper context reveals why Stefanski's job status is under such immediate scrutiny. It isn't only about the Browns' win-loss record or Sanders' box score. It's about the millions tied to jersey sales, sponsorship renewals, betting handle, local business revenue, and national broadcasts. Every one of those lines is trending downward since the injury footage surfaced, and every one of them points back to a single narrative. Kevin Stefanski jeopardized the Browns' most valuable asset. Ownership isn't just deciding deciding on a coach. They're deciding whether to let a business downturn continue unchecked. The future implications for both Kevin Stefanski and the Browns are stark because the stakes extend far beyond a single injury clip. The most pressing scenario is whether ownership concludes that Stefanski is no longer the right steward of their most valuable investment. Jimmy and Dee Haslam are known for being impatient when business growth stalls, and the evidence piling up is hard to ignore. If Sanders misses even 2 to 3 weeks of practice, the Browns could open the season with him underprepared, leading to early losses that tank playoff odds. ESPN's Football Power Index already adjusted Cleveland's postseason probability from 47% before the injury down to 31% after reports of missed reps, and that slide is directly tied to questions about quarterback readiness. From a roster standpoint, Stefanski's decisions over the next month will shape the narrative. If he leans too heavily on a veteran backup, he risks being painted as timid and unwilling to trust the future. If he forces Sanders back before he's ready, the backlash could be catastrophic. Either way, every move is magnified by the fact that the Browns' schedule opens against divisional opponents. A 1-3 start, which oddsmakers now peg as a 38% likelihood, would leave Cleveland clawing uphill in an AFC North where the Ravens and Bengals project at double-digit wins. Ownership has historically fired coaches under less pressure. Hugh Jackson lasted just 8 games into his final season after losing locker room belief, and Freddie Kitchens was cut after 1 full year despite strong support in the building. The financial implications will compound if Sanders' availability remains uncertain. Secondary ticket markets have already softened, but the real test will come if Sanders is sidelined for the team's first primetime slot. Early projections suggest ratings could dip below 6 million viewers if Sanders doesn't start, compared to the 9 to 10 million the NFL had forecasted. That kind of decline not only affects the Browns' profile, but damages the league's broader programming strategy. If primetime ratings underdeliver because of one team's quarterback mismanagement, the league office will take notice, and that often translates into behind-the-scenes pressure on ownership to make leadership changes. Longer term, Stefanski's legacy is now tied to Sanders, whether he likes it or not. If Sanders recovers and thrives under another coach, the narrative will harden that Stefanski was the obstacle, not the solution. History is unkind in this regard. When Jeff Fisher mishandled Jared Goff in Los Angeles, it only took 1 season under Sean McVay for Goff to look like a different player. Fisher's reputation never recovered, and McVay became the face of innovation. Stefanski risks falling into the same category, remembered as the coach who nearly squandered a generational quarterback. That possibility makes his seat hotter than ever, because ownership will be tempted to make the switch sooner rather than later to avoid wasting developmental years. There's also the question of the locker room. If veterans sense that Sanders' health is being compromised, trust in the coaching staff could collapse. Already, whispers of frustration have surfaced in team interviews, and that mood can spread quickly. Once the belief sets in that a coach doesn't protect the franchise quarterback, it becomes nearly impossible to repair. Players may not say it publicly, but internal confidence drives performance. A fractured locker room could spiral into on-field inconsistency, giving the Haslams yet another reason to accelerate a coaching change. Perhaps the most intriguing implication is how Sanders himself will respond. Young quarterbacks often define their relationship with a coach in moments of crisis, and Sanders' camp will surely take note of how this situation is handled. If his family or advisors believe Stefanski put him at risk unnecessarily, it could sour the relationship permanently. In the modern NFL, star quarterbacks wield significant influence over organizational decisions, and if Sanders signals a lack of faith, ownership will almost certainly side with the player. Protecting the franchise quarterback is not just good football, it's good business. The projection then is sobering but clear. If Sanders misses extended time, expect the Browns' playoff odds to tumble into the teens, ticket demand to slide further below league averages, and national broadcast to suffer sharp ratings declines. Each of these outcomes increases the likelihood that Stefanski will not finish the season as head coach. If Sanders returns quickly and produces, Stefanski may buy himself time, but the footage of his injury will linger as a symbol of mismanagement. In the NFL, symbols matter as much as scores, and this one has already shifted the trajectory of a franchise. Kevin Stefanski's tenure with the Browns has always balanced on the edge of results and perception, but the release of new injury footage of Shedeur Sanders may have tipped that balance for good. The clip itself is just seconds long, yet it crystallized every fear ownership, fans, and media had been circling for months, that the Browns' most valuable asset was put at unnecessary risk under Stefanski's watch. Since then, the measurable fallout has been impossible to miss. A steep drop in jersey sales, a collapse in secondary ticket markets, diminished betting handle, and primetime ratings projections suddenly slashed. Each metric tells the same story. Confidence is draining, not just in the roster, but in the leadership guiding it. At its core, this is no longer about a preseason mistake. It's about whether the Browns can afford to let Stefanski continue making decisions that directly impact the trajectory of a generational quarterback. For ownership, the calculus is brutally simple. If a coach's presence is costing millions in business momentum while simultaneously putting playoff odds at risk, the justification for keeping him shrinks by the week. For the locker room, the trust gap may be even more damaging. Veterans and rookies alike know their fortunes are tied to Sanders, and if they sense mismanagement at the top, belief in the system could fracture beyond repair. The broader NFL context makes the situation sharper still. Networks want Sanders because he draws numbers. Sponsors want him because he sells product. Fans want him because he represents hope. And yet, every one of those pillars is weakened the moment his health is in question. Stefanski has found himself not only coaching a football team, but defending against the charge that he's jeopardizing the very foundation of the Browns' relevance. Once that charge sticks, history suggests there's rarely a way back. So the question now isn't whether Stefanski can scheme his way to a winning season. It's whether he can convince ownership, sponsors, and fans that he's the man to protect Sanders and the future he represents. That is a different kind of challenge altogether, one that goes beyond playbooks and Sunday outcomes. The Browns are staring at a crossroads. Either recalibrate with new leadership to safeguard their franchise quarterback, or double down on a coach whose margin for error has all but vanished. And that brings us to the debate every Browns fan is now wrestling with: should Kevin Stefanski be held accountable for Shedeur Sanders' injury and the fallout that followed? Or does responsibility ultimately rest with ownership for creating the conditions around him? More importantly, how much longer can Cleveland afford to gamble with the future of its most important player before the window of opportunity slams shut?